and welcome back to Sparring Pod with me, Hallgeir Gustavsen. Today is another episode in English because I'm so lucky to be joined today by a guy I've seen a lot. I haven't talked to him before, but I've seen him. I've taken his courses. I've been kind of falling in love with his growth-driven design project. Luke has been waking up each morning. He says in his LinkedIn profile at least to excite and inspire other people. It is so nice to have you here. Welcome, Luke Summerfield. Thank you so much for coming.
Of course, I appreciate you having me, especially from all over the world. I always love the opportunity to meet and talk with people in other countries doing interesting things. And that's part of what I enjoy most. Yesterday, I was on a call with folks down in Chile. The day before was Netherlands. The day before was Canada. And so it's just such a very grateful to be able to spend some time with folks all around the world.
Yeah, and you work as a in HubSpot right now as a with the CMS, and but you start. How did you start in HubSpot? What was your entrance into HubSpot?
My life at HubSpot actually goes back before I worked at HubSpot. Before I worked at HubSpot, I was at an agency. Yeah. We were growing an agency. We were a web development shop. And for about the first I was there for about 3.5 years. We were partners of HubSpot, selling and servicing websites and inbound marketing with clients. And that agency ended up going on to getting acquired. And once it got acquired, we had been working very closely with a lot of the product team members at HubSpot. And they asked me, what am I doing next? I said, I don't know. So they hired me without a role. They didn't know what I was going to do. They just knew we'll find something interesting for you to do. And which is really the history of my career at HubSpot and beyond is when they came in, a lot of my history at HubSpot has been them putting me on interesting projects that no one at the company is quite tackling yet. They're looking for someone who they know there's a problem there and there's an opportunity and they need to find some way to get some traction on that. And so at the time when I started, this was now 5 years ago, when we started, at the time, one of our biggest focuses, Hallgeir, our CEO, wanted more people doing interesting things on our CMS. Yeah. And so that was my task. And
quite broad, so to speak.
It was. But, we had a lot of coming from the agency world and knowing that so many agencies use our CMS with their clients. That's where we started to focus was how do we get our agency partners doing more interesting things on our CMS? And throughout the last 5 years, it's been quite a little tour of duty around HubSpot, starting in the agency program, moving to the marketing team and the academy team, doing the certifications. Yeah. And then the last 3 years, I've been on the product team, first focusing on developers and helping build with other team members an experience for developers, the people coding on top of HubSpot. Yeah. And then the last year has been focused on launching our newest hub, which is the reimagined CMS. And so that's what we launched on April 7th, about 2 months ago.
Yeah. I have to admit, I haven't had the time yet to take a look at the new hub. I have to admit, but it is on my to-do list, actually. But your background is quite diverse. You started up with graphic design, or am I misremembering?
I originally started going to school. So actually, it kind of an interesting story where I think a lot of this all came in was when I was real young, the thing that I was really into was paintball. Like the little shoot the guns, play ball. It was like my big thing. Yeah. And when I was in high school, we were having to do about an hour drive to the closest paintball store to get any supplies. Yeah. And for whatever reason, I was talking to my father and he said, and I said, man, it's really tough for us to be driving everywhere. Why not what if we opened a paintball store around here and offered it to all the people? And, and you're a 14-year-old kid. And so you have big ideas. And the cool thing was that my dad was very supportive of that. And he said, why not? Let's do it. He was an entrepreneur by trade. He owned a mechanic and auto body shop working on cars and restorations. And so he was very supportive. He helped me get a loan. We opened up a shop. Eventually we opened up a field. And that was what I did during high school. Was I built up a business, had 6 employees, didn't do anything crazy in terms of sales, maybe a couple $100,000 a year. But it was my project that we ended up selling off or liquidating and moving on when I went to school. So that, I think, was, at least if we go back in my history, that was the start of these entrepreneurial ventures, which has led me on kind of an interesting journey past then. And so when I was at school, when I was at university, I double majored in marketing and business, and on the other end was was design, and with a focus on visual design. And after about 2 years of that, I found out that because those two are quite different. On one end, I was learning drawing and contrasts and art history, and none of that would transfer over. None of the credits would transfer over. So after about 2 years, I said, well, I'm going to just put design. I'm going to learn independently. I'm going to continue with the degree in marketing. And so that was the background there. But the last thing I'll say on kind of my history before getting to the agency and all of that, I always had it like an entrepreneurial itch, because after we sold the paintball store, I said, okay, I'm going to focus on school. That's going to be my sole focus. And of course, 3, 4, 5 months later, I started getting the itch. And so I got a check from school to help pay for my living expenses. But I was like, I'm not going to spend this on living expenses. I'm going to spend this on a new venture. And so it was about maybe 1,600 euro. And I took that money and I got my big passion after paintball was Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, kickboxing, MMA, all the combat sports. And so I said, man, this is 10 or 12 years ago now, 12 years ago. I said, I'm going to start a lifestyle brand, apparel brand for the jiu-jitsu community. There wasn't anything around back then. And so I got 2 t-shirts printed. I figured out how to go overseas and get 2 cut and sew products made with this 1,600 euro. And 4 years later, that little project turned into about 150,000 euro a year sales. It was just me as the sole employee. And then when I got done with school, I sold that business off and moved on. And so there's always been some kind of project to solve a need. And that still continues today with the stuff I'm working on at HubSpot.
Yeah, but it sounds also like you enjoy the fluidity of everything, not just doing one thing and sticking to it. Because I think a lot of entrepreneurs would maybe fall too much in love with a project to just sell it off. But it sounds like you like the building part of it, maybe even more than running it. Am I correct? Ish.
I think every person has kind of their unique contribution, and there's certain folks in a company that they love structure. They love, here are the things I need to do. And they have a very set plan, and they're very good at executing it. Yeah. And you need people like that in a company. You also need people who are always saying the way we're doing it today is not great, and we need to start thinking about it differently. We need to open up opportunities. And so you need both of those, and they're a really good kind of yin and yang. And I find myself, of course, living on we need to continue. We need to be doing something better. Yeah. We need to be thinking bigger than we are today. And I usually find myself, again, in projects where there's a known problem. We know that there's a problem a customer's running into, we're running into, and we know there's an opportunity. We need to build some initial traction. And so that's, I think, where I find a lot of the projects that I run into is build that initial traction and then find a way to hand that project off to a team that is better equipped to scale that. Yeah. And so that's what we did with the brands early on before HubSpot. That's what we did with the agency when the agency got acquired. And then each one of the projects that I've worked on, the growth-driven design, the developer stuff, those have all been handed off to teams that are much better qualified, has much more expertise, have much more ability to build structure and scale around bringing those to a wider audience, and that relieves me to be able to go work on a new product or a new project. So it's where I find myself, at least.
Yeah, it's a bit like ancient Rome, where you had like Caesar, or I'm not calling you a despot, of course, but like one man, one dictator, just coming around making some big changes because he can see that there is something we can do better, and then when it is implemented, it is kind of pawned off to the Senate to just make sure it continues to function, sort of. What was the thought behind growth-driven design? Because I really love the iterative thinking in it.
Sure, and for those not familiar, I can part of this. I'll explain what it is. It really stemmed back to my time at the agency, being on the front lines, working with clients and seeing the pains and struggle that not only our clients were going through, but us. So about the last year before we got acquired, my role at the agency was operations. It was how do we become more efficient? How do we build some structure? How do we build processes? How do we increase profit margins? Profit margins was the number I owned, and employee utilization rates. And when I dug into the operations of the business, every single website we did, every single website was always a nightmare. It always went over budget. It always got delivered late. And that money has to come from somewhere. So it would eat into our own profit margins, or we would, if it pulled out of scope because of the client, we of course would do our best to try to update the proposal to cover the new expenses. But long story short, every single website had something that was causing the train to come off the tracks. Yeah. And when I looked at it, it really wasn't a lack of talent. We had very talented people working on these projects. It wasn't a lack of budget. We had projects where they gave us unlimited budget and they said, just do it right. And we would still run into these. Yeah. And so the more I looked into it, those are all symptoms of the fact that we were using a broken playbook from the beginning to build these websites. And that broken playbook was setting us up for failure before the project even started, because we were just thinking about things and planning things and organizing things and doing the process wrong. So that started at the agency. And at the agency, we tried to figure out what would we do differently to solve that. And we tried some things out, and some things worked, some things didn't. And as we were doing that is right when we got acquired. And so the idea kind of fizzled out. Yeah. When I started at HubSpot, again, I was tasked with figure out how to help our agencies become more successful and grow with our CMS and do more cool things on the CMS. And immediately I thought back to my pains. Yeah. And the reality is that they weren't just our agency's pain. They were an industry-wide pain. It's funny, like everyone that I've talked to about this starts nodding their head.
Sounds quite familiar, yes.
And so I embarked on figuring out, if I launched an agency tomorrow, what would that start? Fresh, clean slate. What would I build for a process? And we put that playbook together. We branded it as Growth-Driven Design as the name. And that's essentially the new playbook for building a peak performing website. Yeah. And it takes a lot of inspiration. There's nothing new in this world. It's all just ideas that are already out there. And so we took a lot of inspiration around what the hyper-growth, the high-growth companies in Silicon Valley, HubSpot, all across the globe, what are their product teams doing with their software products? Yeah. And how might we repurpose that to think about the website as a product and to build a structure and team around that? So there's a lot of inspiration from there. There's a lot of inspiration from the startup world and how the startup world thinks about the phases that a startup goes through and how you measure and prioritize and focus your time and efforts. So a lot of these external influences wrapped together into a system that, again, is nothing new. It's a lot of things people were already doing at some level: product management, UX design, growth experimentation, conversion rate optimization. and pulling those pieces into a system that you can easily implement, easily talk about, easily get your boss bought in on, easily sell at an agency.
Yeah.
And we started talking about it, and the process was pretty interesting how we got some traction early. But we started talking about it, I should say I started talking about it in 2017, and about a year later, we had 1,000 certified agencies in 50 countries doing some level of growth-driven design with their clients, which just speaks to the widespread pain that work to solve.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I think we deliver quite a lot of websites, but it's hard, but just to get developers to understand it, or not understand it, that's wrong, but to get them totally bought in, because it's something new and it's not the way we've done it. But when my experience is that when they see how it can actually help the process and how much lower shoulders you get when you know more of a runway of different projects and what you're supposed to do in the different projects over time, my experience is that people are much more relaxed about their job, basically.
Yeah, it comes back to anytime you want to try to inspire or motivate someone to get on board with something, there's a lot of stories that are baked into an idea, right? So this is where like product marketing comes in. There's a lot of stories, and in this case with growth-driven design, there's a number of stories, and certain stories are going to connect with certain types of people. So it's always important to find out who is the person that you're trying to motivate and inspire. And start with meeting them where they're at, find out about their world. What are they struggling with? What are they trying to do? What are their goals? Where do they want to be in the next 2 years? And start there. And then based off of that conversation or what you know about them, you find the anchors that are in your new idea, your new pitch, those anchors that you can pull that story in and kind of anchor onto their world. And the reality is a lot of the things in growth-driven design may not be interesting to developers, and that's okay. Yeah. And then there's other people who are designers or marketers or a CEO, and they may have different anchors that you use. But so that's really like, again, when it comes to each individual, finding out the anchors and the right story to tell to them to get them on board is good. And also, this kind of just goes back to like good coaching. We want to try to guide them to come to the conclusion that this is the best approach for, in this case, web design, versus telling them. Especially developers. Developers are very like, they're the folks that live in that, I like structure. I like things to be very black and white. I need to be able to have a very good, realistic grasp on what's going on. And so, again, for something new, something different, for anyone, it's scary, but especially someone who, like a developer who has a very set way of how they like to work. Yeah. And again, so if you can take a step back and ask them the right questions. The questions are like the tools in your tool belt when you're a coach. Ask them the right questions that gets them thinking about the pain, thinking about the potential solutions, and almost get them to come to the conclusion that things need to be done differently on their own. Yeah. Then you can turn the corner and say, you know what, we've a couple of people have said that, and I've done some research and we found a better way of doing it. Like, are you interested in learning a little bit more about it? And then they're a little more open-minded to it versus telling them they need to do it. It puts them on the defensive right away.
And also this community of community education platform, the Key. I found it now while I was like doing some background for this talk we're having. And what is Key, and why did you start this? What is it, and how will it improve everyone?
This is my new side passion project. Yeah. So there's no shortage of fun things to do. I try to keep, my mantra last year was to simplify and do less better. And I think I've done a poor job of that because I take on fun projects. But my new project, side passion project, and this is totally separate from HubSpot.
Yeah, yeah.
What I saw, so I'm very, very passionate about education, and I have a firm belief that each and every one of us inside of us already have the opportunity to do great things in life and to unlock bigger potential, bigger greatness than what we maybe believe. And the way to do that is through education, through learning, but also through working and collaborating with other people. You know, we as humans are social creatures. And so when we surround ourselves with people that have knowledge, that have been there, done that, they can help us grow faster and better than if we were to try to do it ourselves. And so when I took a step back and looked at my life in the education world and how I learned best, there were a lot of things about traditional education that are, especially in the US, but I know globally as well, are off. And we could probably do a whole podcast on just that. But for those of you who have gone through the traditional education system, whether that's elementary, whether that's university, or whether that's after university, going back for continuing education, there are a lot of things that traditional education leave to be desired. And when I look at a little bit more progressive types of education, meaning online education, there's a big shift that's happening where a lot of folks now are taking these in-person experiences, classroom trainings, and they're digitizing them. They're bringing them into Udemy, they're bringing them into Teachable, they're bringing them into Coursera, and that's fine. Like that, there's a baseline level of knowledge that comes with taking those courses, but at the end of the day, they're basically taking this broken system that's based off of knowledge memorization and getting an A on a test and bringing that into an online world. There's no surprise that 70% of the folks that start an online course drop out. It's because you're not actually retaining or putting that knowledge into practice. You're just simply watching a screen passively and taking a test. So it doesn't necessarily help you. All that's to say, there's a lot of opportunity that I think in shifting the way that we learn to a more collaborative, more open approach that's centered around community, centered around mentors and coaching, and still incorporates elements of learning, but really allows you to put things into practice with other people. And so that's the vision of Key, is to help millions unlock greatness by transforming the world of education. And how we do that is we're building a coaching platform for educators, course creators, workshop facilitators, where they can build education communities around the topics that they want to teach folks and put it as a complement to their trainings, their courses, their workshops. So it builds a community online. So right now, a lot of people try to do that on Slack and Facebook. That's the main alternatives, but there's a lot of drawbacks and really tough things when you try to build an education community on Slack and Facebook. And so Key is a platform that would essentially replace Facebook and Slack for building those education communities in a better way.
Yeah, because I'm thinking one of the main drawbacks I see as using Facebook groups, for instance, as educational spaces, you have all this noise around you that basically is taking everything, taking your attention away from everything. It's Facebook is normally not the place where you go for education, and I'm saying that as a guy who has like a webinar group for my business where I invite people that are joining our webinar and doing training, but I can see that it is not necessarily the best environment for learning.
Yeah, there's two sides to the coin. So for you as a business owner, and for anyone who's a course creator or a workshop facilitator or a coach, the two sides are, how do we help my community learn? So there's a learning aspect, which is what you're talking about now. The other side is, how do I build a business around education products? And how do I build a business around and build the proper upgrade flows and the proper access levels and charge for the right things? And basically, how do I structure and build a business around it? And so Key works to solve both of those problems. It's a platform that has features and functionality built into it to enhance the learning experience beyond what Slack or Facebook ever could, because they're not really built for education. But at the same time, we're building in tooling for coaches, for educators, for course creators to be able to accelerate or build a business around the coaching products or the education products that they're creating. And so we could probably get into like all the details, but that's really the high level of key and what we're doing there. Again, right now we're in a very early beta. We've only really opened it up to a few folks, but so far folks have been active. We were chatting on it earlier today and messaging, and it might be an interesting thing for anyone who falls into that category and is interested in learning more. It might be something interesting to check out.
Except COVID being over, what are the things you're looking forward to at the moment? I'm guessing you are also looking forward to being able to. Are you like grounded, or do you shelter in place? It's called in the US, isn't it?
Every state in the US is a little bit different, just like every country in EMEA is a little bit different. I live in California, and California, generally speaking, was quite a bit more strict. And so, for a number of weeks, it was not going out, not doing anything. But over the last month or so, it's slowly been opened up. And to the point now, this last week, it's opened up quite a bit where the beaches are now open and you can sit on the beaches. At first, you could only go there to surf or go there to run. You couldn't actually sit. You had to be active. Now they're open to sit. A lot of the parks are opening up. We have a lot of national parks here, which are starting to open up, which I miss. So I'm excited to see them open. And businesses are starting to be able to open with, of course, a lot of rules and regulations and capacity. So it's getting it's getting a lot more open than it was, of course. But we're also seeing in a number of the states where they start to open up too quickly, and then they have to kind of roll it back because they start seeing spikes in numbers. So we'll see what happens.
But you're at the home office at the moment.
Yeah, I work about 2.5 years ago. I used to live in Boston and work out of HubSpot headquarters for about 3 years, and about 2.5 years ago, I moved to work full time out of San Diego, which so I've been remote now for 2.5 years. So we've been fairly fortunate in the sense of like the lockdown and the COVID situation hasn't necessarily impacted us in terms of we don't have kids, so we don't have like extra responsibilities throughout the day. My wife and I were both already working remotely, so we were comfortable with being able to do that. So we're very fortunate that it wasn't as much of a change in our life, but
I tried having like a normal job where I'm the CEO of a digital marketing company and having homeschool for my 6-year-old and 9-year-old, while my wife is an essential worker, so she was at her job out of house, and being a CEO and teacher and a caretaker, it's a lot, man.
It's a lot. I can only imagine, the level of having to balance everything and, the level of anxiety and stress of just managing so many things, including the kids all the time. So hats off to you for the effort.
It was nice when the school opened back up in Norway, to put it lightly. But what other kind of things are you looking forward to then, except the obvious COVID situation?
Well, normally at HubSpot, so if we look at it through the HubSpot lens, at HubSpot, the biggest thing that we look forward to in the second half of the year is our big conference Inbound.
Yeah.
And this is normally held in Boston. We have about 30,000, 25,000 people who come from all over the world. It's a big party. We have a good time. And it's the time when we also use as a milestone for the company to release a lot of new products, a lot of new features. So, in some ways, this summer for us in the CMS side, the business unit and the world that I live in, we did our big launch 2 months ago. And so that was the big thing to look forward to. Of course, at Inbound, we already are working on new products. We're already improving what we have. We're helping support some of the other product launches that are happening. So, the work continues. But what I'm most looking forward to is actually just a little bit of a downtime after so much buildup. I think of this very much like a musician. A musician, they go into the studio and they work really hard on building an album. They release the album and then they go on tour and they're chatting with everyone. Like right now I'm on tour. We did our big release 2 months ago. Now every day I get the opportunity to chat with folks. And at a certain point, that'll fizzle out and we'll get to take a little bit of downtime to relax. So that's probably the thing I'm most excited about, along with we have a number of new projects in the works. We're doing a lot of 3 and 5 year planning. And of course, for me, I always enjoy those bigger vision ideas and the bigger where the market's going. So those conversations are always really fun for me as well.
Do you have like a process for working out ideas for things? Or are you one of those lucky bastards that just gets them out of nowhere?
I definitely have some luck, that's for sure. I think we, the folks that are launching things, if you've launched anything, there's always an element of luck, no matter what they think. So there's some luck behind it as well. But we do have a process. At the end of the day, again, it comes back to having a deep understanding. The 2 numbers that I own are customer happiness and success on the product, which we measure with a Net Promoter Score, NPS, for CMS Hub. And on the other end is revenue, growing the business, right? So anything that falls in there lands in my bucket in some way, which is pretty much everything. Yeah. And so in order for me to have a good understanding of our customers being successful and is the business generating revenue, that requires me and the other go-to-market leads on the product team to have a very deep understanding of, on this side, on the NPS side, it's our customers and the market and what people are struggling with. On this side, it's a lot of internal stuff, basically the internal stakeholders, people, teams, individuals, what are they struggling with? And so I think that's where it all starts. It's just having a regular pulse, a regular conversation with multiple people or your communities to find out what are they struggling with, and being very smart about prioritizing those pain levels. And you prioritize those pain levels based off of frequency. How often do you hear this particular pain point come up? Mm-hmm. And then depth. How painful is this? Is this a deal breaker, or is this like, a little poke in the side?
But
So there's ways you measure that, but that's essentially the 2, generally speaking. And there's sometimes an urgency factor. If there's for some reason something that pushes some urgency into needing to act faster, even if it's a little bit lower pain, sometimes there's certain reasons to do that. And so you look at those and you prioritize those pain points, and then you start working on them. And working on them a lot of times at HubSpot and a lot of other places is the proof is in your action. It's not in talk, show, don't tell. And so we always find a way to explore different options for solving that. And then not only just explore it, but then build out a pilot, build out a prototype, build out something to gain some initial traction that the solution you put together, in fact, solves that original pain point. So, there's it's a lot of inspiration of what comes around with the lean startup community and the things that like Ash Mayorda is talking about in starting lean and running lean, and just thinking about how you go through the process of building a business. But in this case, it's not a business. It's just an individual solution for a problem.
Yeah. It sounds like it sounds like you have the process through collaboration, if I understand you correctly, which also kind of builds up with all the other things you're doing, like with Key and stuff. So it makes sense, absolutely.
There's 2 different ways to get work done. My previous boss, Angela Franco, who's had a product or runs product for the CMS product team. She would describe it this way. We would talk about it. So you can make a project happen using brute force.
Mm-hmm.
And that means I'm going to hustle, I'm going to grind, I'm going to put all the hours in, I'm going to get the work done doing the hands-on work. You can also get a project done through inspiring and motivating other teams to take that project on and work on it with you. Mm. And so my nature is to actually do the first one, which is like hustle, grind, put the work in. I'm going to like get my hands dirty to build this out. That's how I built the original growth-driven design stuff. Yeah. And over the last 2 or 3 years, I've been developing my skills in the other side of it, which is actually finding out the root problem and starting there, and then painting a picture of what the vision of the world would look like if that problem was solved, and then getting other people in the organization, other teams, other departments that are all across the org pulled together, the right people to solve that problem, pull them together and motivate them to prioritize it and take action on it. And so sometimes when a problem comes up in HubSpot, sometimes I have to, depending on what it is, I always try to start with working with other people and enabling them to get some progress done. Yeah. Sometimes they just take it on and they roll with it. And that's great. That's the best, yeah. Sometimes the problem is so wide sweeping and it doesn't fit into anyone's bucket. And so I need to become a facilitator. I need to be the person who's organizing, collaborating, aligning, and getting these individual people from all over the organization to work together. And then we work to solve it. And sometimes there are scenarios where it's me rolling up my sleeves, putting, no one else is helping in terms of direct hands-on work. They're of course helping with consulting and informing, and I can do research, but every project's a little different. It depends on the stage of the company, the stage of where the teams are at. It depends on the magnitude of the problem. So it's a little of all of them. But that's how I think about attacking problems with people and with myself.
Sounds like you're working quite strategic at getting other people's goals aligned with your, which is really smart. It also sounds a bit like have you read Great at Work?
I think I have it on my Audible in my to read list, but I have not read it now.
Yeah, because he's talking about like 7 principles that the most successful workers use, and what you described there is quite. I don't know if it's literal, but almost to the letter. One of the points of the seven principles he goes through. So I think you might like that book. Yeah.
Well, I'll prioritize it on my list to read. Yeah. But yeah, it's a very different. Those two, influencing other folks and motivating and getting them bought in on a vision and doing the hands-on execution work, both are important for different types of projects. But they are very, very different approaches, very, very different skills to develop. And you have to take a very different mentality to approaching one versus the other. And so it's the motivating and inspiring other folks to take on a project and vision is a skill, at least the last few years I've been working quite hard on, and have a lot to learn, of course, but it's something that has been fun to do, a fun and interesting mindset shift in getting other folks to take on things versus trying to take them on myself.
Yeah, and also you're just one man. You have a maximum of 24 hours per day that you can be effective, so it's quite, and then you also need some sleep, so it's good to inspire others also.
Of course.
Yeah. What would you say is the best idea you had if you had to rank them?
I mean, I guess it depends on how we define best. There's multiple ways you could define best. The best being, is that the idea that went on to get acquired? Is that like a business? Is that the one that brought the most fulfillment to my life? Is that the one
the one you're happiest with?
I think the one that I'm most proud of up till this point has been the growth-driven design movement that we started. And I think the reason I'm most proud of that is I get so many. So like a lot of what all growth-driven design is a bunch of ideas that I pulled together, and that's it. And ideas don't make the magic happen. Ideas just plant the seed. And so what's really interesting and what's been very fulfilling is to see folks where that seed has been planted and they go on to take action, and they're the ones who actually make the magic happen, actually make the change happen. And there's stories of how it's impacted the websites they've done, the projects they've done, but also building agencies around it. That's been the most fulfilling. I got one guy who is out in South Africa, and this guy Stefan, and he used to work for a company, and kind of did his 9 to 5 and all of that. And he sent me a message out of the blue, didn't know who he was, and he said, "Look, I went through your trainings, helped get a bunch of light bulbs went off. Yeah. Decided to make a total life change, and now him and his I don't know if it's fiance or wife are traveling all over South Africa doing surfing and just enjoying life. And he's built a business now around implementing and coaching growth-driven design to folks. And so it's just like one story of like a life-changing impact that something like that has. There's a lot of other stories about agencies that I've gotten a few agencies a few years back who messaged me who said they were on the brink of bankruptcy. They were going to close their doors. They just couldn't make any money selling websites. And they sold 2 or 3 deals with growth-driven design. It totally saved their agency. It kept everyone employed. And so those are the things that I think not only is it interesting because that idea has gotten traction, but I think it's also interesting hearing how people put that into place and actually made the change in the world happen, and the success stories and the impact it's had on their businesses, their lives, their employees' lives. Because at the end of the day, that change in the world and that impact is what we're all here for. We're not here to just collect a paycheck. We're not here to just launch a thing. Those are all just, I guess, pieces of the puzzle that happen naturally. It's the outcome is what we're chasing. And so that's probably the project that's had the biggest outcome up to this point in my career. Of course, my new projects, the HubSpot stuff and the key stuff is my hope is that it blows that out of the water and has a bigger impact, of course.
What would you say is your worst idea then?
I have a lot of bad ideas. I think most of the people I work with, I was just thinking about this yesterday. I think most of the team that I work with get so annoyed with me because I pull them in so many different directions, right? You have people who are those, I need structure, I need direction, I need to just be cranking execution work out. And a lot of times I bring a lot of things to them, and I think that probably pulls them in a lot of different directions. So probably out of every 100 ideas I have, 90 of them just fall flat. You just start, but here's the thing: is you gotta start talking about them with people. That's the only way. Like I can sit and I can journal about something as long as I want, but as long as it stays in my head, the idea is really never going to evolve. It only evolves when you go out and you start talking about it and hearing the questions. Hearing the friction, the walls that people have, the defensiveness, the excitement, seeing the emotions that idea comes. And as you're doing that, you start to very quickly see, should I continue down this path of developing out this idea, or should I park it somewhere and move on to something different? And so 90% of my ideas, or, hey, we should think about this, or, hey, have we explored this? They just... They aren't there. They're not there. And that's okay. Yeah. But until you actually go out and talk about them, you're not able to determine that. So to more directly to your question, I guess ideas that didn't pan out. There's a lot of my ideas too don't pan out because I get really excited about them. I think I have the capacity to take them on, or I think someone has capacity to take them on, and we just don't. And so if you don't have enough time or energy to do the work that's required to bring something to fruition, it's easy. It just falls by the wayside. So I think that's, if I were to say what ideas, it's the problem I always run into is, again, biting off more than I can chew and being overly optimistic on what's possible to get done. And I get started on an idea. How much time. And I get started on an idea, and it becomes very, very clear this idea just I don't have enough capacity, and it's not a high enough priority, and so then it ends up getting kicked. So there's a lot of projects that get a little bit further than just conversation. It's we launch something, we launch a page, we launch whatever, we start getting some interest, and then that gets filed away in the back for a later date. But the very few that trickle in and that are worth the time and energy to put in, I've been very fortunate. A lot of them have done quite well. Doesn't mean there's not a lot of screw ups along the way.
Yeah, but also a bad idea can also be the springboard for someone else to improve on your bad idea and to actually pull the goodness out of it. And yeah, so
you never know where like experiences will show up in your future. There's a lot of things that I was doing with the clothing brand, with the paintball store, that when that chapter in my life closed, I was like, all right, that's it, I'll move on.
Yeah.
And then I get into some project 5 years later, and that project has some element that other folks on the team are struggling with, that 5 years ago was a part of that previous project, and I could bring that experience or that insight or that particular idea forward. And so it's funny with relationships, with projects. You never know where they're going to go. No. You never know. When I was at the agency, I would have never guessed that the people I was collaborating with at HubSpot later would hire me and put me in a position where I'm at. So I guess that's like as much as you want to focus and stay focused, you also want to be open to chatting with good people, working on different projects, at least at some level, even if it's just consulting or just talking about or guiding or advising a project. Because you never know where those things will end up later down the road and how it'll help you.
3 things, if you had to go to a deserted island, 3 things you can't live without.
Well, I will assume that my wife is coming with, so I'll leave that off the list. But my wife, that would be one on there for sure. The second thing would be either a Kindle or an Audible. With the ability, either loaded with books or ready to go. The classic books, not the books that are going to be out of style in a couple of years, but the ones that have stood the test of time. That would be the first thing, because you can read a book so many different times and get so many different meanings out of it, depending on the context of your life, where your brain's at. And that's what I do quite frequently when going back to these projects. Anytime there's something, there's 2 topics right now that are part of the projects I'm working on, and I will specifically pull as many of the books on that particular topic from different industries, from different areas, and really just marinate in them. And what I mean by marinate in them, a lot of these books I've read already, but when I put them in on Audible, or if I'm, I'll read them, but actually in this process, when I'm more marinating in an idea, I put them on Audible, because it's not so much what they're talking about in the book that I'm learning in that particular moment about. It's more that the conversations will spark another idea related to the context of my world. And then I got my journal, right? So that's maybe the other thing I would bring with is the set of books and then a journal. And there's something magical about putting things on paper that, as much as we are in the digital world today, having something tactile that you can write on. That's also why I like a lot of paperback books as well. Is there's something about having a tactile that makes it easier to get into a flow, at least for me and from a lot of people I talk. So I think a journal would be the second one. And the third one that comes top of mind is likely some type of physical workout equipment, bands, kettlebells, something, because the best place to get your mind and to get your mental and physical, or your mind and your spiritual side of your body aligned, is to start with movement, start with body. And that makes it, all those other things, a lot easier. So whenever you want to do something, if you start with physical movement, and then dive into the actual thing you want to do, most likely, blood's flowing, ideas are going, a little bit better mood. So some kind of physical thing. Of course, you could do body weight stuff and not require any equipment. That's probably an answer as well. But that's the next thing that comes to mind.
But I think you're totally right in taking care of the physical and the mental side of your core. It's important, and I recognize the challenge that it actually has been during COVID and the lockdown, and to keep both sides kind of happy, because I've felt on the brain rot, to put it lightly.
That's one of the now the quarantine was an extreme example of this, but that happens with folks that work remotely all the time too. There's a certain level of distance, and we call it cabin fever in the US, where you're like stuck inside and you get anxious. And I find myself as someone who works fully remote dealing with that on whether we're in quarantine or not, because that's just part of working remote. And so, but yeah, I view 5 aspects of life, 5 pillars of life. There's physical fitness, there's mental fitness, there's social fitness, family, friends, community. There's financial fitness, which is career, debt, investments. And then there's spiritual fitness. And spiritual fitness doesn't necessarily mean religion. It just means contributing to something greater than yourself and being a part of something bigger than yourself. And the goal is to have all 5 of those things in balance. The reality is you never can, right? So there, you see a lot of folks that focus a lot on the financial part of their life, the CEOs that are very successful in the sense of they made some money, they're maybe financially successful, but they're bankrupt in all of those other 4. They've gone through a ton of marriages, they're overweight, they've gotten, they've had heart attacks. And so in my definition, that's not what success is. Oh. Then you have the other people that are the bodybuilders, right? And they're maybe like physically successful, but they're living out of their friend's basement or their parents' homes. They can't pay their bills, so they're not financially successful. Maybe they're going through depression because they're just in the gym all the time and they don't have a community around them to support community. So, it goes back to like, what's the definition of success? And the way that I defined success for myself is those 5 aspects: physical, mental, spiritual, social, and financial, having those in balance. And whatever level you're at is another story. That doesn't mean that you're successful if you're at a very high level, very low level in all of those. But when you have those in balance, or as close to balance as possible, that's the definition of success. And so that's when I think of the things I would bring to an island, to the question, we have some physical stuff. The books are mental, the journal, obviously is a blank canvas, so it can be used in many ways. Of course, bringing my wife is the social. So I would really bring things that would fulfill those 5 areas and allow me to keep balance on those.
Yeah, I'll show you a picture. This is me.
Oh, wow.
This is me.
Quite a change in your life.
7 and 5 years ago.
Well, that is congrats to you, man. Thanks. I mean, that doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen without hard work and dedication.
Yeah, when you were talking about the fat CEO, I felt that was kind of me. So
yeah, but and there's the thing is, it's just all it is having an awareness that one or more of those other 5 aspects of life is out of balance. Yeah, and the discipline to invest in those other aspects of life. And for type A people like myself and probably yourself, who are like very driven, very hungry, like you think a lot about maybe the business if you're an entrepreneur, it takes a certain level of discipline and understanding that you need to invest. You need to pull some of that energy back from the financial aspects of your business, of your life, and invest in the mental, invest in the spiritual, invest in the social, knowing that although it may feel that your business is not growing and you should spend your time more on your business, everything's all connected. Yeah. Everything is all connected. And when you spend time in the mental side of your life, in the physical side, in the social side, it's going to make the ideas, the conversations, the mental patterns you're using in your business that much better. So it's all connected. As much as we want to kind of compartmentalize things, you really need to invest in all of it. And it's going to, all tides are going to rise when you invest in all of those.
Yeah. What are your favorite apps?
My favorite apps, the one that I've been loving, outside of the HubSpot app and outside of Key, the ones that I've been using the most, obviously Slack. I hate email. Absolutely hate email, and I feel really bad because I have about a 2 or 3 week backlog on email at all times, and so I feel bad because it's not an intention of like I don't want to get back to people, but there's only I need to be smart about where I prioritize my time, and usually Slack is an area where the people that I'm interacting with Slack are directly working on a project with me, and therefore the conversations happening there take priority to move that project forward. But Loom is another one. Loom's like a video recording, super lightweight, and their new Loom app that's on phones are just phenomenal. So that's like an interesting one. Miro is another one. It's like a virtual whiteboard and collaboration tool. And so it's one that I've played with, but I really need, like, I haven't had a project since I started playing with it that we've fully embraced it. So I think there's some like fun things I've used, but right now it's more like the honeymoon phase where I think it's so cool and I'm like playing with it, but we need to put it into a project. But I know a lot of people do put it into projects successfully. And then one that I'll give you, I mean, there's a bunch of other ones. I use Sketch. I use all kinds of different ones. I live on screenshot software as well. But the other one that I just stumbled on from Typeform, which I love Typeform as well.
I like Typeform.
It's videoask.com. And it is a phenomenal tool. It's one that I thought about building a few years back, and is something I have in mind for Key, as building something similar to that and maybe leveraging their APIs. But essentially what it is it's a way to have asynchronous conversations with people through video. So for example, I do this through Loom today, where I'll say, look, instead of doing an initial first meeting because our schedules conflict, or, you know, I'm in Pacific time zone in California, you're over in Europe, and so the time zones don't match. Let's start with an asynchronous meeting where you record a video with your questions, with your opening, and then I'll respond with a video and we'll go back and forth. And so we had been doing that at some level with Loom, and now Typeform released a product that's built basically specifically for that. And so it's a little bit slicker, a little bit better UI and UX for doing that type of asynchronous video conversation. And my hope is that something like that replaces messaging, replaces email, replaces meetings as well, because meetings are most of the time a waste of time. So it's a very interesting app that I'm keeping an eye on, but still has a level of personality, a level of human connection with the video, and versus something that's text.
Cool. In the end of my interviews, I have 10 really what's it called? Fast. It's like a
rapid fire. Yeah, that's what we call it here.
Yeah. What's your favorite word?
My favorite word is right now is rad. I think I don't know why, but I'm using rad quite a bit. When other people are contributing ideas and things like that as a way to kind of get them. I don't know. Maybe it's because I live in San Diego or something. San Diego's rubbing off on me.
It feels a bit 80s. I love it. What word do you like the least?
I like complaining the least. So any word that's related to complaining, or I can't. I think that's a like anytime there's I can't. I ran into a wall. It's not possible. I guarantee it's possible. It's just how much money, time, energy, creativity do you want to throw at it? So I don't like folks that have limiting beliefs like that. Not folks, but I don't like words or language that about limiting beliefs.
Yeah. What kind of things do you enjoy the most?
I mean, outside of spending time with my wife, we're like best friends. We work together all day. We go surfing. She does jiu-jitsu too. She's a purple belt. I'm a black belt. So we train together, travel together. But outside of that, what was the question again? Just making sure I answered properly.
What kind of things you like the best?
I mean, outside of work, Brazilian jiu-jitsu has contributed the most of my life in those 5 aspects. And it's just such a puzzle, such a chess game, and it's never ending. I've been doing it 14 years now. Black belt, competed all over, went to Russia and to fight, and like just such a never ending puzzle to figure out. And just when I think like, okay, I'm feeling good about it, someone comes up with some technique or something different that just is like, I'm like a white belt. Like, I'm scraping the surface. So it's been a good one. That's also, a lot of the things that I've learned in jiu-jitsu that I've been forced to learn in jiu-jitsu to be decent at it have very good are able to be applied into business life and other parts of my life, which is great.
Cool. What kind of things do you dislike the most? Well,
politics,
politics and complaining,
religion. Yeah, I guess things that are outside of my control that cause negativity. Of course, we want to focus on things that are within our control. Yeah. And I also want to focus my time and energy on things that are positive, things that bring change, not just negativity in the world that I can't change. And I find a lot of times, as much as I know there's differing beliefs on a lot of these things, I find things like politics being very much outside of my control and being very, especially in the US these days, very polarizing, negative type of conversations. They're not constructive. They're not good. They're very polarizing. And I guess a sub bullet point of that is the media and the world that the media has created with we don't care if it's true, we just want to get clicks type of a thing. So I think it's just a lot of toxic stuff that I try to keep out of my life.
Yeah. I stopped reading the news a couple of years ago now, because my thought is that if something really important happens, somebody will tell me. So
yeah, it'll get to you some way if it's important and it affects you.
Yeah. What's your favorite sound?
My favorite sound is, well, right now I'm learning to play the ukulele. I'm really bad at it, but it's a fun little project. I got an 8-string electric ukulele with an amp, and I'm going to buy some pedals to do some distortion and all kinds of fun stuff. Just stupid stuff you would never do with a ukulele, but would be fun. And so that's not necessarily a sound, but I really enjoy that. The other one that I really enjoy is, and there's a couple instruments that do it, but like the singing bowls, the Tibetan singing bowls. I don't know if you're familiar with those, but the crystal singing bowls. We also just bought a really large wind chime that the wind will blow, but we actually installed it inside our house, which no one does, but we do because we're weird like that. And we open the doors and it gets a cross breeze, and so you get this wind chime, really deep. And the reason I love those sounds, and my wife loves those sounds, is that there's something about the frequencies that, and there's science behind a lot of this too, is the frequencies just cause you to get the tingles, and it causes you to just feel good. And so those are nice.
The brain tickling,
Yeah, so those are I guess in terms of pure sounds, those Tibetan bowls, and there's a few other like instruments that do something similar. But
have you heard glass harmonica?
I don't know if I have. I mean, I might have, but like I'm not putting the sound to the name.
Glass harmonica. It's like maybe 2 meters of different kinds of glasses that are circling. And then you get the sound you get when you put your finger on a crystal glass. But the people who can play it, they can actually play it, so it sounds awesome.
I know what you're talking about now that you describe it. I've listened to that, and it does a very, very similar thing. It starts getting your hair standing on end and your mind going. It's good.
What kind of sound do you hate?
I hate, it's funny because the answer probably changed. I used to love big cities. And I think as I've gotten older, I've grown to appreciate nature a lot more. And so, I know there's people that absolutely love big cities, and I think I was in that boat in a previous life. Yeah. But, these days, big cities, it just gives me anxiety, and it also just makes me think about, a lot of the pollution and a lot of the harm that we're doing to nature by not surrounding ourselves with it. So I think big cities and cars and construction and all that stuff.
What's your favorite curse word?
Fuck. For sure.
If you were to have a profession outside the one you're having at the moment, what would that be?
I mean, it would go back to why I get out of bed every morning, which is to help other people unlock greatness and unlock more greatness. And so then there's lots of ways you can do that. Of course, I'm trying to do that at HubSpot, and I'm trying to do that through software, and I'm trying to do that through coaching agencies. But I think it's coach and educator doing workshops, and I'm almost positive that will be what I will be doing at some level in the near future. I already do it, you know, things like this, things like I do a lot of workshops, I do a lot of things already today, but maybe that, but finding new areas that I can run things, those 5 other pillars of life, other areas outside of just business and work and marketing. Like there's a lot of other interesting things to do, workshops and trainings and education on, and coaching.
What profession would you not have?
I mean, the first one that jumps into my mind quickly is lawyer. I've always been very allergic to law. I mean, they have like one of the highest depression, which is sad, but the highest depression out of all careers. And until my most recent, when we launched CMS Hub, I worked with a really good lawyer, Matt. And the reason that I liked him is because I always felt whenever I worked with a legal team, I'd always put it off until I couldn't put it off anymore. And because I would always feel like I'm hitting a wall, and it's always like negativity, hitting a wall, like stopping us in our tracks. And a lot of times it's for reasons that are never going to happen. It's just that's their job, is to try to like think of all the potential risks and block things that will never happen. Matt, on the other hand, was really good, where we brought him in right in the beginning, and he was such a good partner for guiding us. And so that's the difference. It's the difference between him helping guide us to still get to where we want to be, but do it in a way that's safe and reliable and we're good, versus hitting a wall. And so I think, I don't know. Anyway, long story short, probably lawyer. Or accounting. I hate accounting. I hate accounting. I need people around me who can fill that part, because accounting and finance and all that is so important, absolutely important, so smart. And at HubSpot, I'm lucky enough, we have a lot of really good people that are good with that. And so we work as a good yin and yang, but I hate it myself. I'm not good at it.
If heaven exists, what would you have God tell you when you arrive there?
This is maybe my California person in me, my hippie in me, but and this is something I believe, whether it's God tells or not, is or if you believe in God, that when you boil all things down to very core, it's fear and love, and those are like the things that we do in life, all boil down to fear and love, and the things we don't do in life are fear and love. And so I don't know, maybe just some reaffirming knowledge that it all boils down to fear and love, and all the other stuff that we have, all the problems, everything all boils down to fear and love. And so the more you can embrace love in all aspects of life, to yourself, to other people, to projects, to nature, to everything, the more good you're going to have, and the more you can release yourself of fear, the less you're going to be held back.
Nice. And with those words, I thank you so much for joining me today. It was a pleasure having you here.
Yeah, it's so much fun. I don't get the opportunity to talk about a lot of things outside of just HubSpot and marketing and web design. And I'm fortunate to have a lot of conversations on that, but to have a conversation about all different things and some deeper thinking is always really fun. So I appreciate you getting the conversation, having me.
Well, thank you so much. If you could hold just a couple of minutes to all the other people, have a wonderful weekend and speak suddenly.